Hello, great minds, and welcome to today's Mother's lesson. We are going to be looking at the topic. You are going to be taught on the topic consigned from one's nation, 2 Kings chapter 24. So you read 2 Kings, that is a reference scripture for you. So right now in this lesson, we are going to be looking at the following things. Firstly, we look at the condition of the nation of Israel, then response to the state of the nation. Then we look at the reconstruction of the walls of Jerusalem, and we look at some lessons that one can learn from this lesson. Now, a nation as a corporate entity undergoes some turbulent times. This may be political, economic, social, or otherwise, as it were. So a nation must undergo some turbulent times. It is in the face of these problems that people show love for their nation by identifying themselves with these problems and preferring solutions. So people identify themselves with the problems and they try their best to bring solution. So in this topic, we shall see how the nation of Israel underwent series of political turmoil that almost led to the destruction of the nation. How the nation of Israel went through some political issues, as it were, that almost led to the destruction of the nation. In the series of the battles that led to the final destruction of Judah, there was a man who first attacked Judah. So there were a series of battles that finally led to the destruction, like you see on the screen, that finally led to the destruction of Judah. So it could be deduced that the nation of Israel went through different turbulent times in terms of the Bible days, in terms of their history and how they were destroyed. And this could be seen in form of political battles and otherwise. So in the series of battles that led to the final destruction of Judah, Pharaoh Necho of Egypt was the first to come up against the land of Israel. Pharaoh Necho was the first to attack the nation of Israel. He was the first to go against the nation of Israel. Pharaoh Necho, he made Eliakim king in place of his brother Jehoahaz, Jehoahaz, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. So he changed his name to Jehoiakim. He took Jehoahaz away to Egypt, where he eventually died. Jehoiakim was a stooge of Pharaoh Necho, who he used to collect taxes from the people of Judea. Now, subsequently, he used to collect taxes from the people of Judea. Subsequently, Egypt was defeated. Egypt was defeated itself by Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar. So in his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Following this defeat, we could see that Jehoiakim became the servant of Nebuchadnezzar for 3 years. So now, King Jehoiakim became the servant of Nebuchadnezzar for 3 years before he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. To crush this rebellion, Nebuchadnezzar sent a contingent of Chaldeans, Syrians, Moabites, and Ammonites to destroy Judah. So it is worthy to note here that it had earlier been prophesied that the Lord would send enemies to destroy Judah because of the atrocities of their king and their unfaithfulness in serving God. Their God that brought them out of Egypt. You could see them serving the graven image. So it was prophesied that God was going to go against them. Now Jehoiakim died before the arrival of the invaders that was sent by Nebuchadnezzar. Now his 18 years old son of Jehoiakim, called Jehoiachin, Jehoiachin, Jehoiachin reigned in his place. Like his father, he did what was evil in the sight of God. So Jehoiachin did what was evil in the sight of God. When Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, besieged the city, he took him captive and carried off all the treasures in the house of the Lord and the treasures in the house in the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold in the temple of the Lord, which Solomon king of Israel had made. He also carried away the mighty men of valor and 10,000 captives. Only the poorest group was left in Israel. Now Nebuchadnezzar made Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king in his place, and changed his name to Zedekiah. So Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign. So when he began to reign, later he rebelled against the king of Babylon, and consequently his city was besieged again. Now, when the famine became so severe, he and the servants wanted to escape, but they were captured and taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah. Now the king passed death sentence against him. They slew his two sons and removed his eyes. Now they slew his two sons and they actually removed his two eyes. They also bound him with fetters and took him to Babylon, where he died. Shortly after, the Babylonian army, under the command of Nebuchadnezzar, came and burnt the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, the king's house. So they took him captive. You could see them taking him captive, and it was a bad experience for Zedekiah. Now they also bound him with fetters and took him to Babylon, where he died. So in case you are asked in the exam situation, where did he die? You say he died in Babylon. And shortly after, the Babylonian army, under the command of Nebuchadnezzar, came and they burnt the house of the Lord. You could see the picture on the screen, how they gushed out his eye bulbs and how he was critically dealt with. And all this could be traced to the fact that the people of Israel, they started worshiping foreign gods, as it were. So now, apparently, it was seen that God was really against the people of Israel. So let's look at some of the response to the state of the nation. In that the nation had been defeated by Nebuchadnezzar. Even the temple, you could see the fire burning the temple. Even the temple that was built during the days of King Solomon had been destroyed, all because they went astray. So the temple was destroyed, and a lot of atrocities actually took place in those days. So let's look at shortly the response to the state of the nation. You could read as a reference scripture. The NIV version of the Bible is the recommended version of Bible for students. So I expect that you have one with you right there. So Nehemiah 1, you could read Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 1 to 11, 2, verse 9 to 24, verse 1 to 24. Now I follow the conquest of Israel by Babylon. Israel did not exist again as a nation. Most of the people were taken as captives to Babylon. Though they were not enslaved, but they settled in a particular area. They were allowed to acquire and own property while in Babylon. Most of them eventually attained positions of importance in the government. Now Babylon and all its empires were now under Persia. Now there were some persons who contributed to the rebuilding of the temple, and firstly was Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel led about 50,000 Jews to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. You could see him rebuilding the temple, to rebuild the temple of God. Some Samaritan Jews offered to help in the work, but their offer was turned down. So 50,000 Jews. So most of them therefore mounted a stiff opposition. So he faced some oppositions. Nehemiah himself also was one of the Jewish people who reinstated the state of Israel by building the walls, the Jerusalem walls. Now they completed building the Jerusalem walls. Nehemiah was the cupbearer of King Artaxerxes. He had access to the king. He then used his position for the welfare of his people. When he received the report of the state of the nation in Jerusalem from Anani, his brother, he was not happy. He therefore sought permission from the king, and it was granted. So he went on to build the Jerusalem walls. Jerusalem was rebuilt by Nehemiah. It was rebuilt by Nehemiah, and he actually equally faced stiff opposition as well, particularly from Sanballat and Tobiah. But because God was with him, they were able to, to complete the project. As a matter of fact, Ezra, a Jewish scribe versed in the laws of Moses and the ordinances and the statutes, came back with 60,000 Jews, and his aim was to carry out religious reforms. So he came back with 60,000 Jews. So some of the reasons for the positive response of the Jews to the return home was, firstly, the people had a feeling that home is home, coupled with the spirit of nationalism. Secondly, in a foreign land, they could not freely, practice their culture and religion. And slavery is a cost to any people. It showed to fulfill God's promises. All right, so right about now, we are going to be looking at the construction proper, the construction of the walls of Jerusalem by Nehemiah. Nehemiah, a captive in Babylon, was visited by Hanani. Nehemiah wanted to know the state of Jerusalem. Nehemiah was told that the remnants of the land were in great trouble and shame. He was told that the gates of the wall were broken down and destroyed. This made Nehemiah sad, and he wept bitterly. And as a matter of fact, he fasted and prayed for several days. He requested for his freedom from the king of Babylon. He was allowed to go. On his arrival at Jerusalem, he delivered the king's letter to the governors of the princes. So right now, look at the following evaluation questions. Which of the pharaohs of Egypt first attacked Israel? Who defeated the Egyptians? At what age did Joachim started reigning? Discuss the response to the state of the nation. Who reconstructed the temple? Discuss how Nehemiah rebuilt the walls, and list 3 lessons to be learned from Nehemiah's action. We have come to the end of the class for today. Do have a nice time. Answer the evaluation questions in your notes. See you in the next class. Do have a nice time. Bye.